Hey, Engine Doc back with you again. We got the old famous out here, and last few times I've been running, it's been getting lower and lower on compression, and I found out that it's probably got a chunk of carbon under the exhaust valve. I've flipped the exhaust valve a few times before, and kind of got it to seal up. But take a listen. I'll have you listen in the muffler here. Hear that leakage? Yeah, it's coming up on compression and leaking out the exhaust. So I've got a chunk of carbon under the exhaust valve that I can't get snapped loose. So we're going to go into the old famous here and decarbon it. So let's get on with it. Alright, I got the muffler off. You guys that run these engines a lot, you know that they run real fat. Take a look at the carbon buildup just inside the muffler here. And take a look at this. Let's look down in the elbow. This thing is half full of carbon. So I think we're on the right track. Let me, I've got this loose already. Let me take this off. This elbow. Take a look in there. I don't know if the camera can see that or not, but it's half full of carbon. Let's get a flashlight and take a look in the port. Chunks of carbon. There's a valve in there. I thought I could go through the exhaust port here and clean it. I might be able to, but you know what? I'm going to take the igniter off, decarbon it, take the cylinder head off, decarbon it, make some new gaskets if I have to. I want to take a look at this weld job. This is the famous weld job here. A lot of guys paint this and grind it down, paint it, cover it up, but this is a fantastic job of brazing. And don't let guys fool you. 99% of these engines have been frozen and busted and repaired. And take a look at the weld, the brazing on this thing. So we're going to look at the deck and see how that brazing looks. It doesn't leak a bit, runs great when it has compression. Looks like a smoke box of a locomotive in there. So I'll bring you back when I've got it apart. Okay, got the fuel lines broke loose at the unions here. Just laid over the rocker arm and its linkage. Here's a first look inside. There's about, well, in some spots at least 1/4, maybe 3/8 of an inch deep of carbon. And doesn't look real good in there, but it will here after a bit. Here's a look at the valves. An extreme amount of carbon. We're looking at the exhaust valve right there. There's the intake. The intake seat looks pretty nice and shiny in there. You probably can't see it in the camera, but the let me raise the exhaust valve here. The exhaust valve is hung up with some carbon. So there's 1/8 of an inch of carbon around here, and there's the igniter hole. And no, there's no asbestos in there. Yeah, right. Okay, but anyway, we're gonna get our decarbon. Start with my get that old nasty gasket off of there with my mask on, of course, and go from there. Get that cleaned up, then we'll clean up the carbon inside. What else do I have to show you? Oh, the igniter. It doesn't look too bad. There's the points in there, but lots of carbon. New gaskets for all, so that's an initial look. We'll look at it when we get it cleaned up. I'm going to go ahead and pull that exhaust valve out of there. Okay, got the valves out. here's the intake, nice and shiny all the way around. The intake seat. The exhaust is a different story. It's got chunks of carbon everywhere, and lots of chunks inside the port. Here's the valve. It can't see any part of the seat on it, or the sealing surface, the face of the valve. Here's the intake. Looks pretty good, but it's going to get cleaned anyway. And pretty cool way the valves are held in. They're threaded, and these keepers go on there and thread on, and then there's safety pins in them, and there's pins at the bottom of the exhaust valve here at the bottom of the threads here. So you put a safety pin in there, cotter pin, to keep it in case this would come off up here, keep it from falling into the cylinder and wrecking the engine. Here's the intake valve. I'll show you more about this when we go back together with it, but when it's clean, you can actually see what you're looking at. So it's pretty good engineering here so far. Well, things are cleaning up pretty well. They did a nice job brazing this thing. Got a nice penetration, did a nice job of planing it off and making it flat, and it did not leak at all. So got the valves all cleaned up. I got one over here, the exhaust valve over here in the grinder, and I've taken some real light cuts on it. These are 30-degree valves, so I'm going to go ahead and do a little more grinding here, and so on. Well, that old grinder does a nice job. I'll hit that with the lapping compound now. We'll see where we're at on the cylinder head itself, on the seat. Oh yeah, that's in a good spot. Well, it looks like it's in a good place. Let's put some bell grinding compound on there and see how it feels here. A little wide, but not bad. I'm going to run it. And here's the intake. Come out just as nice. We'll see where we're at with it. Try not to let it chatter. If you lift it out and put it right back, you get new compound on there. There we go. Let's have a look. Decent. Very good. Okay, I went ahead without boring you. I put it together, put the valves back in it, new cotter pins. This has a little spacer down here to keep the valve from fully opening. It's kind of a stop. This is also adjustable here by screwing it up and down so that the little valve catch here will hold the intake valve closed while it's coasting, while the intake valve or exhaust valve is held open. This little latch here holds the intake closed and doesn't let it suck fuel. I will adjust that if needed after I get it running, but I just wanted to show you the way the valves are set up here, and they're threaded, and then this collar actually threads on, and you thread it down far enough you can put that pin in there, then bring it back up and tighten it up against the pin, and it's there. And I don't know if the camera will show it, but there's also a cotter pin down here inside the spring there. I don't think we can see it, but anyway, in case some of this would fail or break off or whatever, that'll keep that valve from dropping in there and wrecking the engine. So what I've done here is I've used K&W copper coat and coated my gasket that I made. And areas of concern, of course, here are around the welds. So what I've done, I want to test this before I put any more parts on it. And so I've put an air fitting up here, and I've got my air turned way down on a regulator, and I'm going to plug this in here. And now we've got air going in there, and I've got a little bit of a cap here slipped over. This pipe goes to the cylinder. There's the air compressor. Let me turn it off. Okay, anyway, that's on the lower pipe, and this is the feed water to the cylinder. Here is the return water back down to the screen. So all I have to do is, I've got air coming out right here, so all I have to do is put a finger over that, and what I do is just put a finger over that easy, and I sprayed that joint there around the head gasket with soapy water, and we're looking for bubbles when I pressure it up a little bit, and didn't find any. So that's kind of a quick and easy way to check my seal, at least on the water side to the outside of the engine. So I'll go ahead and put it the rest of the way together, and we'll get it running and put water in it and see if everything stays where it should be put. Okay, the next challenge is going to be sealing up the igniter. And looks like it was designed to have just this little copper ring right here. And I've inspected that and examined it. It looks like it's in pretty good shape, but when I took this apart, it had this conglomeration of all kinds of nasty gaskets on it. So I can only presume that it was at one time notorious for leaking. So this copper seal may be compromised. Now I have, if you've seen any of my other videos, I've made some copper seals before, and I may try to make a new one for this one as well. But I'm going to see how bad this leaks first. I don't believe that this should have any kind of gasket like this on there, because, you know, in 1910, when you were out using this engine and you needed to take the igniter off and clean it, clean the points, these gaskets weren't readily available. You didn't have time to mess with it, so that's why they put that copper gasket on there, and it should seal the compression. Keyword should. So we'll see how bad it leaks. It may not leak at all, but we'll see. Just thought I'd show you that. That's a typical type of seal for an igniter. So we'll go ahead and get it bolted on there and see if it leaks. Okay, here's an update. After making several of these gaskets for the igniter, it just kept blowing them. Here's one here that's blowed in two, and here's another one. Well, these two are together, and that one blew. I tried doubling them up, and that didn't work. Tried putting K&W copper coat on it. That didn't work. I'm talking within 2 minutes of running, this thing would pop out and blow out and push that gasket out. So, here is what was in it. This little copper ring is what was in there. So I got me some wire, and I cut some wire and made a copper ring and annealed it, softened it so it would mash in there. And this is a 14 gauge. This was a 12. This was the first I'd grabbed. It was a 12 gauge, and it didn't seal. So I went and got some 14 gauge Romex I had laying around, and I stripped a piece out of it. And here it is. I'm going to make one out of this to see if it will work. In the meantime, I made, here's the igniter, and here's the last try I made was this one. It's fairly thick though, and I couldn't get enough pressure. I really don't want to put enough pressure on this thing. I don't want to take a chance on busting this casting by cranking it down on something that small. So there's the groove in there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there is a groove in there. And so this time I want to put this, take this off, take some 14 gauge wire and see if I can make one out of it. And we'll let you know. This one seals, and I've run it for quite a little while on there, on this one, but it leaks. You can just hear it whenever it takes a breath and fires, it leaks past. So I'm trying to get rid of that leak and get a complete seal. So let me bend this up and fit this in there, and we'll try this next time. Here's a close-up shot of what I'm trying to accomplish here. I've got the wire cut close, and I also cut it at an angle, so when it does mash in there, those two angles will come together. I've got to cut off just a little bit of it and get it, to meet each other in there, and then I will anneal it and soften it and try to put it in there and try it once more. I'm using an old pair of these handy cuts, I think their craftsman to cut this wire does a pretty good job. Okay, we're set up on a fire brick. I'm going to anneal it here. Using match gas. We'll let that cool. I think that can even be quenched. I'm going to let it cool naturally. Okay, here it is in position. There's my little gap. That'll squeeze together nicely. I'll have to take probably a dental pick, reach down in there and squeeze that together as I tighten it, and I would hope that as it tightens up it'll squeeze down into the groove, but hey, who knows? We're about to find out. Okay, we'll put this project to bed. The 14 gauge wire that I put on there is holding just fine, so we're going to let it go at that. Call it fixed. The little girl runs pretty good, actually.